Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Katie and we're on part 2 of the repainting a painting I did 2 years ago. That was a bit of a mouthful to say, wasn't it? Just to bring you up to speed, I've been on YouTube now for 2 years and my first video was opening this sketch pad on the floor at my old home with a very similar mermaid picture. Now don't worry if you haven't seen that first ever video, I will be doing a recap of that original drawing at the end to compare it with this drawing / painting. I popped a video up last week of the pen process of drawing this out and a bit of a chat, so if you haven't seen that one I recommend you watch that either now or at the end of this one. It's pretty much a straightforward drawing of what you're about to see. With that being said, let's talk about the painting process that's going on right now. The paints I'm using are the Japan Holbein, which my lovely friend sent to me, and there's also a video of that up if you haven't seen it already. The colour scheme in that palette is absolutely perfect to recreate this drawing. It's very similar to the colours I'd used beforehand. And speaking of the colours I'd used beforehand, well, it was kind of around the time I was getting back into watercolours. I was using a combination of Reeves watercolour, W.H. Smith's watercolour, a hint of Dew and Inktense pans, and some Van Gogh ones as well. You could say I hadn't got an established collection of watercolours at that point, and with the exception of the Van Gogh and the Inktense, the ones I was using at the time weren't possibly the best examples. They were very old paints and they were just about student quality to work with, so I wasn't really getting a good representation as to what I could do with watercolours. And more than anything, I'd just done it for entertainment whilst I was looking after the shop during quiet time. Now, with this being cartridge paper and not watercolour paper, it's not really ideal for doing a lot of layers and building on because it lifts off so easily. However, that was the only paper I had with me at the time, and yes, I know I was in an art shop, but I can't buy everything every time I cover it, otherwise I'd have no money. And I liked the uniqueness of this sketch pad, and when I drew out the original I had no idea I was going to paint it. I'd kind of drawn it, lined everything up and thought, okay, what on earth am I going to do with this now? But the second time round I had a little bit of an insight as to how this paper would behave. And just because it's not on watercolour paper doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. So your paints are not going to behave the same as they would on a hot press. Even though you've got the same smoothness there, the paper just doesn't have the sizing on there, which is going to keep it wetter for longer, for want of better words. But that's okay, I knew it was going to do that. It dried really quickly as I was going along, and I kind of tried to find a sweet spot where there'd be enough water on the page where the paint would move, but not too much to cause the paper to massively buckle, even though it did, and it really did provide some challenges for the folded sides. It left a very uneven texture, but I can say that I didn't hate that. I quite liked it and I thought it suited the picture really well. If you think about it, things underwater can distort and can change the lighting and the colours, so I reckon it kind of added to the aesthetic of it all being underwater. For once, I didn't want it completely flat and graphic or logo-like. It's a painting and it looks painted, so that's a win in my eyes. After I'd added that first layer of pink, I added an additional layer of yellow on the top because I just thought it really gave a nice bright and vibrant orange, which is very similar to the original. And rather than paint the whole area where there was hair, one layer of pink and one layer of orange, I did them separately because for some reason that made it stand out. Maybe it's because throughout the painting process there were different dilution levels of the paint, and again though that makes it more authentic. It adds a little bit of depth, even though what's going on in the background of the octopus is probably not physically possible. For adding in those details of hair and actually making it look like hair, I would alternate between using different shades of pink and deep yellows from the palette. And again, this just adds a little bit more interest to the picture and a little bit more movement and directions to where this hair's flowing. For the octopus, I kept it relatively simple as the background has got plenty going on there. I gave a wash of yellow ochre, and I do believe I used a touch of Paul Rubens watercolours in there, just for 1 or 2 shades that I thought would work best. I attempted a wet on wet layer here, but again that paint dries really quickly and I had to take in mind that I was right on a seam of a page and I did not want to damage the binding there or have it falling apart. However, I did manage to achieve that on some parts of it, and due to how quickly the paper made the watercolour dry, and also I'd got the heating on the house, so that kind of contributed to it. I really like how it spread and then stopped, and I like that. Okay, it's not really something I'd want if I was doing a proper big watercolour piece on watercolour paper. That's not what I'd want at all. But I kind of consider this as an experimental piece, both of them and any more I do in this book. And I think sometimes it's nice to learn what your paint can do on different surfaces, even if it's not the intended surfaces. If that makes sense. Am I waffling a little bit here? To compare this to the original, I thought I would add the trident within the octopus's arms rather than having it all crammed in on the first page with the mermaid's face. And although this is a redo, it's also, how can I improve it? And I'm sure if I do another one, I should be asking the same questions. I thought having a less busy first page would entice somebody to open them pages and find the surprise octopus in the middle. Again, I did use metallic paints to paint pearls everywhere. I added more pearls throughout her hair rather than being in the octopus's arms, because the octopus's arms are busy with the trident, right? I used a variety of metallic paints, including Van Gogh metallics, and I used some Gansai Kuretake metallics and some handmade watercolours by Quartz metallics. Said metallics a lot there, didn't I? And I also used gold and copper tones to add some highlights to her hair. Again, when the light catches it, it's just going to get your eyes to dart from one side to the other, giving it a bit of direction and interest. Now there'd been quite a lot of layers of paint, well, as many as I could manage. Those lines that I'd originally drawn were sort of getting lost amongst the colour. I had a hunch that would happen, so I went and did the outlines all over again and used a thicker pen this time, and I am glad I did, because things are standing out a lot more now and it's just generally looking a little bit more finished. I used some Daler-Rowney professional white ink for the highlights on the octopus as well as the glimmers in their eyes. And this was preferable to use white over metallics just because I don't think that would have been a good fit. As much as I like things all nice and sparkly, I think there has to be a nice balance and limitations. So we are all done, and I have tried to replicate this as closely to the original. So here is the original drawing that I'd done 2 years ago, with the surprise octopus in the centre. I'd actually used the Van Gogh metallics to add all the sparkly highlights on here, and they still work really well. And here is the redo. Obviously the watercolours are a lot better quality than what I was using originally, and the whole thing's a lot more vibrant. Now, I don't have a preference for one or the other, to be honest. I think they both mark a point in my journey, especially uploading videos, and they're both pretty important. The first one started it all off for me, and this one here was just something I really wanted to do just to see how much I've changed. And a way to say thank you to all you awesome people who have been watching for 2 years. I want to say a massive thank you for all of those lovely comments you left last week. They really mean a lot to me and I was really touched, so thank you. And of course, thank you for watching this video, and I do hope you've enjoyed this two-parter. There should be some more on screen now if you want to watch them. In the meantime, I'll see you on the next one. Bye!